The Dominion had ruled the stars for 300 years. Their empire stretched across 17 star systems. Their warships were so large that they blocked out the light of suns when they passed. Their armies numbered in the billions, and they had never known defeat. High Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and looked at the blue planet rotating slowly on the main screen. It was a small world, covered mostly in water, with patches of green and brown land. His 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the data scrolling beside the image. "This is the world called Earth," said his science officer, a thin named. "Population approximately 8 billion. They call themselves humans." Made a sound of disgust. "Look at them. They have barely reached their own moon. They still burn dead plants for energy. They fight wars among themselves with primitive weapons." He turned to face his officers. "This will not be a conquest. This will be a collection." They had a simple method for expansion. They found weak worlds, demanded surrender, and absorbed the population into their empire as workers and servants. Those who refused were destroyed. It was efficient. It was clean. It had worked for 3 centuries without failure. "Send the ultimatum," commanded. The message was broadcast on every frequency that human technology could receive. It appeared on television screens across the world. It interrupted radio stations and phone calls and internet connections. The message was simple and translated into every human language. "People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Dominion. You will surrender your world and submit to integration. You will provide workers for our empire. You will give us your resources. You have 1 planetary rotation to comply. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." Watched the planet from his bridge and waited. He expected panic. He expected their primitive governments to collapse into chaos. He expected to see their tiny military vessels launch in desperate, futile attacks. None of that happened. For several hours, Earth was simply quiet. No response came. No attacks were launched. The planet continued to rotate as if nothing had changed, began to feel annoyed. Did these creatures not understand what was happening? Did they not comprehend the power that waited above their world? Then a transmission came. It was not from any government. It was not from any military. The source was traced to a small building in a mountain range that humans called the Alps. The transmission was audio only, and the voice that spoke was calm, almost amused. "You should have asked the others what happened to them." That was all. The transmission ended. Stared at the communication officer. "What others? What does that mean?" The officer checked his instruments. "I do not know, High Commander. Our records show no other species has made contact with Earth. They are alone in their system." Then it is a bluff, decided. A desperate attempt to create fear. These humans are even more primitive than we thought if they believe such tricks will work on us. He ordered his fleet to prepare for invasion. 12 carrier ships moved into position above the planet. Each carrier held 100,000 soldiers, the finest warriors the Dominion had ever produced. Their weapons could level cities. Their armor could stop any projectile these humans might fire. They were unstoppable. But as the fleet moved closer, approached the High Commander with concern on his face. "Sir, I am detecting something strange." "What is it?" "Our long-range scans of the human population centers. The numbers are changing." Looked at the data. 6 hours ago, their scans had shown billions of heat signatures in the major cities. Now those numbers were dropping, rapidly. "Where are they going?" demanded. "Underground, sir. Our deep scans are showing massive structures beneath the surface. Tunnels, chambers, entire cities built into the rock of their planet." His voice was confused. "These structures are old, sir. Decades old, perhaps longer. They have been preparing for something." Felt a small flicker of unease, but he pushed it away. "It does not matter where they hide. We will dig them out if we must. Begin the invasion." As the first landing ships descended through Earth's atmosphere, another transmission came from the planet. This time it was not from the mountains. It came from everywhere at once, broadcast from thousands of hidden locations across the globe. The same calm voice spoke again. "We gave you a chance to leave. You did not take it. What happens next is your own fault. We want you to remember that." Laughed. Brave words from rats hiding in holes. All forces proceed with planetary assault. Show these humans what true power looks like. The landing ships broke through the clouds and descended toward the largest cities on Earth. New York, Tokyo, London, Beijing, Moscow. The soldiers inside prepared their weapons and checked their armor. This would be easy. This would be quick. None of them noticed that as their ships descended, the sky behind them was growing darker. Not the darkness of night, but something else. Something thicker. Something that seemed to swallow light itself. None of them noticed that the stars were disappearing one by one. None of them noticed that on the ground below, in the empty streets of the empty cities, shadows were beginning to move. High Commander watched the invasion begin and felt satisfied. Another world would fall to the Dominion. Another species would learn their place in the galaxy. He did not know that in the hidden places of Earth, billions of humans waited in silence. He did not know that they had been waiting for this moment for 300 years. He did not know that every human child was taught the truth from the day they could understand words. The truth was simple. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and humanity was not safe. So humanity had prepared. They had dug deep into their world. They had trained soldiers unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. They had built weapons that did not burn or explode, but something far worse. They had learned to make darkness itself into a weapon. And now, as they descended into the empty cities of Earth, humanity was ready to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. The predators had come to Earth expecting easy prey. They had no idea that they were about to become prey themselves. The first boots touched Earth's soil at exactly 6 in the morning local time. The sun was rising over Tokyo, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was, by any measure, a beautiful morning. Squad leader led his unit of 50 soldiers through the streets of the great city. Their armor gleamed in the morning light. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy. They moved in perfect formation, trained and ready for any resistance. But there was no resistance. There was nothing at all. And stopped in the middle of a wide street and looked around. The buildings rose high on either side, their windows dark and empty. Vehicles sat abandoned in the roads. Doors hung open. Food still sat on tables in restaurants, growing cold. "Where are they?" one of his soldiers asked. And checked his scanner. It showed residual heat signatures everywhere. People had been here recently, perhaps only hours ago, but now there was no one. 8 million people had lived in this city. Now it was empty. "Spread out," and ordered. "Search the buildings, they must be hiding somewhere." His soldiers moved through the empty streets, kicking open doors and checking rooms. They found homes with meals half-eaten on the table. They found offices with computers still running. They found hospitals with machines still beeping, monitoring patients who were no longer there. But they found no humans. Reports came in from across the planet. Every city was the same, empty, silent. Billions of people had vanished without a trace. They had conquered many worlds, but they had never seen anything like this. On the bridge of the eternal conquest, High Commander received these reports with growing frustration. They cannot have simply disappeared. Find them. "Sir," said carefully, "our deep scans show massive movement in the underground structures. The humans have retreated beneath the surface. All of them." "Then we will go down and get them," declared. "Send troops into the tunnel entrances. Flush them out like the vermin they are." But before the order could be carried out, something strange happened. The lights went out. Not just the city lights, Everything. Every piece of technology suddenly stopped working. Weapons powered down. Communicators went silent. Scanners showed nothing but static. Even the lights inside their armor flickered and died. And stood in the middle of Tokyo and felt true fear for the first time in his life. His helmet display was dark. His weapon was dead weight in his hands. He could hear his soldiers calling out in confusion, their voices the only sound in the empty city. Then the sky began to change, and looked up and watched as the blue sky turned gray, then darker, then black. It happened slowly at first, then faster and faster. Within minutes, the morning sun had completely disappeared. A darkness unlike anything he had ever experienced settled over the city. This was not the darkness of night. Eyes were designed to see in low light. They had evolved on a dim world and could navigate by starlight alone. But this darkness was absolute, total, perfect, and could not see his own hand in front of his face. "What is happening?" a soldier screamed somewhere to his left. "Stay calm," and ordered, but his voice shook. "Form up, find each other by voice." His soldiers called out, trying to gather together in the blackness, and counted the voices. 47, 48, 49, one was missing. "Private report." Silence. "Private." Nothing. Then he heard something that made his blood turn cold. A soft sound like cloth moving through air. It came from his right side, close enough to touch. But when he reached out, there was nothing there. Another soldier screamed. The scream cut off suddenly, replaced by a wet gurgling sound, then silence. "What was that? What is out there?" And reached for his blade. At least that did not need power. His fingers found the handle and he pulled it free. "Everyone, weapons ready, blades only. Something is here with us." He heard his soldiers drawing their blades. He heard their breathing, fast and frightened. He heard their feet shifting on the ground. And then he heard something else. Footsteps, soft, almost silent footsteps, moving between his soldiers, moving around them, moving through them. But that was impossible. No living thing could move through a group of armed soldiers without being detected. No living thing could see in this perfect darkness. Another soldier fell, then another, then three more, and swung his blade wildly at the darkness, hitting nothing but air. He could hear his remaining soldiers doing the same, striking at shadows, fighting enemies they could not see. "Report," he shouted. "How many are left?" Only 12 voices answered. 38 of his soldiers had died in less than a minute, and had not seen a single enemy, had not heard a single weapon, had not even felt the movement of air as something passed him by. Then he heard breathing, right next to his ear, close enough that he could feel the warmth of it on his skin. A voice spoke in perfect language. It was a human voice, soft and calm. "You should not have come here." And spun and slashed with his blade. It cut through empty air. The voice came again, this time from his other side. "This is our world. This is our darkness. You do not belong here. Show yourself," and screamed. "Fight me like a warrior." Laughter echoed through the darkness. Not cruel laughter, but something worse. Amused laughter, the sound of a predator playing with its food. "Fight you," the voice said. "We are fighting you, you simply cannot see it." Something touched his neck, something sharp. He felt a sting, then a spreading numbness, then nothing at all. His last thought before the darkness took him was a question. What had they awakened on this world? Across the planet, the same scene played out 1,000 times. Soldiers stood in empty cities, surrounded by impossible darkness, and died without ever seeing what killed them. High Commander received no reports. His communications were dead. His sensors showed nothing. He stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at which displayed only blackness. Earth had disappeared. The planet was still there. His instruments confirmed that. But the entire world was now covered in darkness so complete that no light escaped. "What is this?" he whispered. "What have they done?" No one answered. And in the darkness below, humanity smiled and continued its work. The invasion had begun. So had the hunt. 300 years before they arrived, a farmer in rural Brazil found something strange in his field. It was a metal object, the size of a small car, half buried in the earth. It was not from any nation on earth. The symbols on its surface were not from any human language. The technology inside it was centuries beyond anything humanity had ever created. The governments of the world worked together in secret to study the object. They learned it was a probe, sent by an alien civilization to study Earth. They learned that the probe had been transmitting information about humanity for decades. They learned that somewhere out there, among the stars, other species knew about Earth. And they learned that those species were not friendly. The probe's memory banks contained data about dozens of civilizations. Most of them no longer existed. They had been conquered, absorbed, or destroyed by larger and more powerful empires. The galaxy was not a place of peace and exploration. It was a place of predators and prey. Earth was prey. The leaders of humanity faced a terrible truth. They could not match alien technology. They could not build ships that traveled faster than light. They could not create weapons that could destroy entire planets. Even if they worked together, even if they devoted every resource to defense, they would still be hopelessly outmatched. So they asked a different question. If they could not fight aliens on alien terms, how could they fight on human terms? The answer became Project Umbra. The project began with a simple observation. Humans were afraid of the dark. Every culture on Earth had stories of monsters that lived in shadows. Every child feared what might be hiding under the bed. This fear was ancient, burned into human genes over millions of years of evolution. But why? Humans were not hunted by nocturnal predators in large numbers. They were not especially vulnerable at night compared to other dangers. So why was the fear of darkness so deep and so universal? The scientists of Project Umbra found an answer. Humans feared the darkness because their ancestors had been the most dangerous thing in it. Early humans had learned to hunt at night, to move silently through shadow, to strike without warning and vanish without trace. The fear of darkness was not the fear of being prey. It was a memory of being predators. Project Umbra set out to awaken that memory. They built underground cities, massive complexes carved into the rock of every continent, connected by thousands of kilometers of tunnels. These cities could hold the entire human population if needed. They were hidden from any scan, shielded from any sensor, invisible to anyone looking down from space. They developed new technology, not weapons of fire and explosion, but weapons of darkness and silence. Devices that could absorb light on a planetary scale. Chemicals that could disable alien technology without harming human machines. Poisons designed to attack alien biology while leaving humans untouched. But their greatest creation was the Umbral Core. The core was recruited from every nation. Men and women who showed unusual ability were selected and given a choice. They could live normal lives, or they could become something else, something humanity had not seen in thousands of years. Those who agreed were taken to special facilities deep underground. There, they began their training. For the first year, they lived in complete darkness. They ate in darkness. They slept in darkness. They trained in darkness. Their eyes adapted, but more importantly, their other senses grew stronger. They learned to hear the heartbeat of a person across a room. They learned to feel the vibration of footsteps through the floor. They learned to smell fear on the skin of their enemies. For the second year, they learned to move. They ran through obstacle courses filled with traps and sensors, and they learned to pass through without triggering a single alarm. They practiced walking on different surfaces until they could cross a room full of dried leaves without making a sound. They trained their bodies until they could remain perfectly still for hours, invisible even to the most advanced detection equipment. For the third year, they learned to fight, not with guns or bombs, but with blades and hands and the perfect precision of those who could strike without ever being seen. They studied anatomy, both human and alien, learning exactly where to cut, where to press, where to strike to disable or kill instantly and silently. After 3 years, they were no longer entirely human. They had become living shadows, predators of the darkness. And then they were returned to normal society. An umbral operative might be your neighbor, your teacher, your doctor. They lived normal lives, raised families, went to work, but they trained every night in secret facilities. They stayed ready. They waited. For 300 years, they waited. When the ultimatum came, the plan went into effect. The population moved underground through entrances hidden in every city. The darkness systems activated, surrounding Earth in a shell of absolute blackness. The technology disruptors fired, shutting down every piece of alien equipment on and around the planet. And the Umbral Corps emerged from their waiting. Director stood in the command center buried beneath the mountains of Switzerland and watched the reports come in. Her face showed no emotion, but her heart was beating fast. This was the moment her entire life had been building toward. All population centers report successful evacuation, an officer announced. No civilian casualties. Darkness shell is stable, another officer reported. Complete coverage confirmed. Technology disruption at 100%. All alien equipment non-functional. Nodded and the Corps. A smile crossed the officer's face. They are hunting, Director. Enemy casualties are increasing rapidly. Looked at the screen showing the dark surface of Earth. Somewhere up there, alien soldiers were dying in the shadows. They had come to conquer humanity. They had expected to find sheep. They had found wolves. Continue operations, she ordered, and send a message to the alien fleet. Tell them they have 1 hour to leave our system. After that, we will consider them legitimate targets. The message was sent. The hour passed. They did not leave. Smiled, that was fine. Humanity had waited 300 years for this moment. They could wait a little longer for the aliens to understand their mistake. The hunt would continue. Private L had been a soldier for 20 years. He had fought in 9 planetary conquests. He had killed hundreds of enemies and had seen thousands more die. He had never known fear. Now, standing in the impossible darkness of an alien city, he was terrified. His unit had numbered 100 soldiers when they landed. Now there were 11 left. 89 of his companions had died in the past 3 hours, and L had not seen a single enemy, had not heard a single shot, had only heard the soft sounds of bodies falling and the silence that followed. The survivors stood in a tight circle, backs to each other, blades drawn. Their technology was useless. Their training was useless. Everything they knew about warfare meant nothing in this darkness. "Stay close," Sergeant whispered. "Do not separate for any reason." L pressed his shoulder against the soldier next to him. He could hear her breathing, fast and scared. He could feel her trembling. 20 years of conquering worlds, and now they were huddled together like children afraid of the dark. A voice came from the blackness. It spoke imperfect, but with a strange accent, as if the speaker had learned the language from recordings. "You have killed many worlds." The soldiers spun, trying to locate the source, but the voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You have enslaved many species. You have destroyed civilizations that existed for longer than your empire has been alive." "Show yourself," Sergeant shouted. "Face us with honor." Soft laughter echoed through the darkness. "Honor? You speak of honor. You came to our world to take our children as slaves. You came to steal our resources and destroy our culture. You did not offer us honor. You offered us extinction." The soldier next to Elle made a choking sound and collapsed. He had not felt her move, had not felt any impact. One moment she was alive, the next she was dying on the ground at his feet. 10 left. "What are you?" El screamed into the darkness. "What kind of monsters are you?" A pause. Then the voice spoke again, closer this time, almost gentle. "We are not monsters. We are humans, and this is how we have always hunted." Another soldier fell. Then another. El swung his blade wildly, cutting at the empty air, hitting nothing. He could hear his remaining companions doing the same, their blades whistling through the darkness. 7 left. "Do you know why we fear the dark?" the voice asked. "Your scientists probably wondered. A species that lives on a world with a bright sun, that has no natural nocturnal predators, yet carries such deep fear of darkness. It makes no sense, does it?" 5 left. El heard 2 more bodies hit the ground. "The answer is simple. We fear the dark because we remember. Deep in our blood, in our bones, in our souls, we remember what we were, what we can become. We remember that we were the most dangerous thing to ever walk in shadow." 3 left. El could hear Sergeant praying to gods that seemed very far away. "Your probe found us 300 years ago. You watched us fight our small wars with our small weapons. You saw our divided nations and our petty conflicts. You thought we were weak, primitive, easy prey." 2 left. The sergeant's prayers stopped mid-word. "You were wrong." El stood alone in the darkness. His blade shook in his hand. His body refused to move. He knew he was going to die. He knew there was nothing he could do to prevent it. "Please," he whispered, "please, I do not want to die." The voice was right next to his ear now. He could feel the warmth of breath on his skin. He could sense the presence of something standing inches away, invisible and patient. "Then you should not have come here." El felt a sharp pain in his neck, then he felt nothing at all. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, High Commander received the final casualty reports. Of the 120,000 soldiers he had sent to Earth's surface, fewer than 4,000 remained alive, and the number was still dropping. "This is impossible," he said. His voice was hollow, broken. "How can this be happening?" His officers had no answers. They stood at their dark, useless consoles and said nothing. The communications officer suddenly gasped. "Sir, I am receiving a transmission. It is being broadcast directly to us." "From the planet?" "From everywhere, sir. Every direction at once." "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was the same voice that had spoken to the dying soldiers below. Calm, patient, almost kind. "High Commander, this is Director of Earth. Your forces have been defeated. Your soldiers are being eliminated as we speak. You have 2 choices. You can order your fleet to leave our system immediately, and we will allow your surviving troops to evacuate. Or you can stay, and your entire fleet will join your army in death. His hands gripped the arms of his command chair. "You are bluffing. You cannot reach us up here. We are safe in orbit." "Are you certain of that, Commander?" A sound came from somewhere in the ship, a soft thump, like something moving in the ventilation system. His blood turned to ice. "We have been aboard your ship since you entered our system. We have been watching, waiting, learning." Another sound, closer this time, from the corridor just outside the bridge. "Your technology is useless. Your weapons are dead. Your soldiers cannot see us, cannot hear us, cannot fight us. You are alone in the dark, Commander, and the dark belongs to us." The lights on the bridge, already dim, began to flicker. One by one they went out, watched as darkness crept across his ship, swallowing his officers, swallowing everything. "You have 1 hour to leave. After that, we will assume you wish to continue this war, and we will be happy to oblige." The transmission ended. Sat in the darkness of his bridge and made the only decision he could make. The only decision any rational being could make. "All ships," he ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Full retreat. Leave this system immediately. Do not stop until we are clear of their space." As the fleet turned and fled, looked back at the dark sphere that was Earth, he saw lights appearing on its surface, tiny points of brightness in the endless black. The humans were turning their world back on. They had won. They had always known they would win. And understood now, too late, that his empire had made the worst mistake in its 300-year history. They had tried to conquer the darkness. The darkness had conquered them instead. The Dominion never spoke of Earth again. When High Commander returned with the broken remains of his fleet, he was quietly removed from command. There was no trial, no public disgrace. He simply disappeared from the military records as if he had never existed. The invasion itself was classified at the highest level. Every surviving soldier was sworn to secrecy under penalty of death. But secrets do not stay secret forever. Soldiers talk, officers gossip, data files get and shared. Within a decade, the story of Earth had spread throughout the Dominion. Within a century, it had spread to every corner of the known galaxy. The stories changed as they traveled. They grew larger, stranger, more terrifying. In some versions, Earth was a living creature that swallowed entire fleets. In others, humans were not physical beings at all, but shadows that could take solid form when they wished. In the darkest versions, Earth was a prison, a place where the galaxy's oldest and most dangerous predators had been locked away since the beginning of time. One story never changed. Everyone agreed on one detail. Do not go to Earth. Do not contact Earth. Do not think about Earth. Pretend it does not exist and pray that it never notices you. Traders who operated near the Sol system learned to avoid it completely. They programmed their navigation computers to create routes that curved far away from the unremarkable yellow star. When asked why, they would change the subject, or they would simply leave. Some species did not believe the stories. The Combine was a young empire, aggressive and ambitious. They had conquered 6 systems in 3 decades and believed they were destined for greatness. When they heard the tailies of Earth, they laughed. Fairy tailies, they called it. Propaganda spread by weak species to protect a weak world. They sent a probe to Earth to gather intelligence for an invasion. The probe entered the Sol system and transmitted data for exactly 4 minutes. Then it went silent. They sent a second probe. It lasted 3 minutes. They sent a military scout ship with a crew of 12. It never reported at all. They decided that Earth was not worth the trouble. They focused their expansion in other directions and never spoke of the Sol system again. But sometimes, late at night, their leaders would wake from nightmares they could not remember and feel afraid of something they could not name. The collective was older and wiser than They were scientists, explorers, seekers of knowledge. They did not want to conquer Earth. They simply wanted to study it. Surely, they reasoned, the humans would welcome peaceful contact with a species that meant them no harm. They sent an ambassador ship to Earth, broadcasting messages of peace and friendship. The ship entered the Sol system and was immediately surrounded by darkness. When the darkness lifted, the ship was still there, but the crew was gone. In their place was a single message, written in the language on the walls of the bridge. We do not want contact. We do not want friendship. We want to be left alone. This is your only warning. There will not be another. They never sent another ship. They added Earth to their star charts with a single notation: forbidden, do not approach. As centuries passed, Earth became less of a place and more of an idea. It was the example parents used to frighten children into behaving. It was the worst punishment criminals could imagine. It was the name species whispered when they wanted to invoke absolute fear. The dark world, the shadow planet, the place where predators go to die. And on Earth itself, humanity lived their lives in peace. The underground cities were still maintained, kept ready for any future threat. The Umbral Corps continued to train new generations, passing down their secrets from parent to child. The darkness system stood ready to activate at a moment's notice. But these things were background noise. Most humans went their entire lives without thinking about them. They lived in their cities of light, raised their families, built their cultures. They argued about politics and sports and art. They fell in love and grew old and passed away, just as humans had always done. Director retired 10 years after the invasion. She wrote no memoirs, gave no interviews. She simply disappeared into a quiet life in a small town where she grew vegetables and watched the sun rise every morning. Sometimes, children from the town would come to visit her. They knew she had been important once, though they did not know how. She would give them cookies and tell them stories about the old days. "Were you scared?" a little girl asked her once, "when the aliens came?" Thought about the question for a long time. "No," she finally said. "I was not scared, I was excited." Why? Because we had been waiting for so long. For 300 years we prepared, we trained, we built, and finally someone came to test us. She smiled at the memory. We were ready, we had always been ready. The little girl thought about this. Will they come back? Maybe someday. Maybe another species will forget the stories and try again. Looked up at the sky, at the stars that were beginning to appear in the evening light. But it does not matter if they come. We will always be ready. That is what we do. That is what we are. What are we? The girl asked. Looked at her, at this small child who would grow up in a world of peace, who would probably never know war or fear or darkness, but who carried within her, deep in her blood, the same thing that every human carried. We are survivors, said. We are protectors, and when we need to be, we are predators, the most dangerous predators the galaxy has ever seen. She patted the girl's head gently. But mostly we are just people, people who want to live in peace and be left alone. Far above them, the stars shone bright and cold. Somewhere out there, alien empires rose and fell. Wars were fought across 1,000 worlds. Species conquered and were conquered in an endless cycle of violence and death. But none of them looked toward Earth. None of them dared. And in the quiet houses of a quiet world, humanity slept peacefully, dreaming of tomorrow, watched over by guardians who never slept, protected by a darkness that was entirely their own. They had come to Earth expecting sheep. They had found something else entirely. And the galaxy had learned its lesson well. Some worlds are not meant to be conquered. Some darkness is not empty. And some prey is more dangerous than any predator could ever imagine.